Hello and welcome to WJTS in.form. I'm your host, Bill Potter. And again, joining us tonight in the studio is Congressman Larry Bucshon of District 8. And he's a very busy man, but took a few moments to stop by and talk with us today. Congressman, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk about, there's a lot of talk about the sequester.
Yeah.
And now the big talk seems to be how the FAA is affected. First of all, how is the FAA affected?
Well, the FAA has an annual budget of about $16 billion, and they were being asked to cut about $600 million from their budget. And let me tell you, the FAA has the ability to do that without affecting air travel. And I'm on the Transportation Committee, I'm on the Aviation Subcommittee. We had the director of the FAA in front of our subcommittee and our committee recently. And I can tell you that if anyone out there doesn't believe that a federal agency can't find a 5% of waste in their department without affecting the American public, then I don't know many people that really believe that. I certainly don't believe that. And I think that, for example, the next generation of air traffic control technology that's being put in planes and at airports called NextGen, the FAA is $4 billion over their budget on that alone. So, there is room for the FAA to tighten their belts, just like every American household has had to do. These federal agencies are bloated. And I think, unfortunately, what you saw last week with the air traffic control was a political statement to try to put pressure on Republicans in Congress to increase taxes on the American people. And I just think it's unnecessary.
6% to me doesn't seem like a lot to cut. How does something like that become so bloated that now 6%, they have to furlough people, they have to let off traffic air controllers?
Well, let me tell you, for example, the amount of money that is spent on things like conferences and on all kinds of things. I don't have the list with me, but the list is long at federal agencies where the taxpayer dollars are really used for purposes that are unnecessary, in my view. And I think, this is not necessarily a partisan issue. I think both sides on the Transportation Committee recognize that the FAA should have been able to tighten their belt by 5% without any trouble at all. And I think, if you look at what happened with the air traffic control, furloughs were not necessary. In fact, we heard through our committee that some airports are overstaffed with air traffic control. And we heard from air traffic control people themselves through the grapevine. They were being told by Washington, D.C. to make this difficult on the American people purposefully, to make a political statement against the sequester and against controlling federal spending. And I think that, although we do need to make sure that we have enough money to provide the services that the federal government needs to provide for the American people, every federal agency budget has expanded dramatically over the last 4 years and needs to be reined in. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I think it's unfortunate that the FAA and the administration tried to use this to make a political statement. And that's my view.
Well, the FAA is just one government agency.
That's
now,
right.
Are we going to start seeing this, after the big to-do about the FAA, are we going to see it now with another group?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think as much. I mean, I think you're seeing it a little bit at the Department of Defense, but not as much. I think, things that are visible to the American people are where they want to try to make it look like it's difficult to sequester. Let me give you an example at the Department of Defense. They're not allowing the Blue Angels to fly their regular schedule this year. Well, that costs about $37 million for the Blue Angels to fly for an entire year. Okay? The president just went overseas and offered Jordan $150 million in more aid. We just offered other countries millions of dollars in more foreign aid. Yet we can't continue to fund one of the biggest promoters of the military that helps them with recruiting and also has such an impact on local economies when they turn up for their air shows, that we have to not do that, yet we can give millions of dollars in foreign aid to other countries when we're holding back on our own citizens. So I think it's unfortunate. White House tours is another example. They don't need to stop tours of the White House. That's being done for public purposes to make a political statement. And the Washington, D.C., and I've only been there a little over 2 years, has a little problem with prioritizing the taxpayers' money. And I think, both the White House and Congress need to prioritize our spending more than we have in the past. And I do think we need to focus somewhat more on our own people and our own citizens at a time when budgets are tight. And we're not doing that. The White House isn't doing that. The agencies aren't doing that because they want this to be painful.
Well, the sequester is to help save taxpayers' money to pay for the deficit.
Yeah.
Is there really a solution? Is that a Band-Aid?
No, I think it is a Band-Aid because, but it's a start. The biggest problem we have in the federal budget is we're not addressing the 60% of the budget, which is the mandatory spending, which is the interest on the debt, and the entitlement programs and other mandatory programs that need to be addressed. And we need reform in mandatory spending programs, or we're not going to be able to get a handle on this. It's just the numbers are too daunting, and I think that until Washington, D.C. addresses the entire pie chart of federal spending, including the mandatory programs, you're going to continue to see what's called discretionary programs pinched. And I'm very concerned about that because, as I have said, the federal government provides a lot of services that are necessary for the citizens, and we want to continue to do that and do it in a cost-effective way that doesn't waste the American taxpayer dollar.
Okay, and in Washington, is it run so political that they don't know what business sense is? Does that seem to be what has happened?
I think there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of politics that comes into play. But I think there's honest disagreements on policy also. I mean, I think the president and myself obviously have different views of how to manage the federal finances. You may have just seen this week where the president and others have come out and they basically don't believe that we really have a financial crisis. And Ms. Pelosi has said that before. And, when you're borrowing 42 cents of every dollar that you spend every day, I think that you have a financial problem and it needs to be addressed. But, excuse me, there's policy, but there is a little bit of politics at play. That's true.
Well, good luck with trying to get it straightened out in Washington.
We're trying.
Okay. Anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Congressman, thank you very much for being our guest.
You're welcome.
Our guest has been Congressman Larry Bucshon of District 8. Thank you for watching WJTS in Form. We are local people watching local people.